Hello, it's Hug here. I thought I'd try something new for a change. I thought I'd try and do a basic World of Warcraft tanking guide, as you can see on the screen. If you're enjoying the content, please like and subscribe. Obviously, this isn't intended for people who know what they're doing in World of Warcraft and how they play World of Warcraft and how tanking works in World of Warcraft. That's not who this is for. This is for people who have never seen World of Warcraft before and think to themselves, I want to play a tank. What does that involve? And me, having played a tank for quite a long time, many years in fact, not so much anymore, but many years, I thought, maybe I can try and do a presentation, because why not? So let's begin. Let's crack on. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in. Let's go. Right. So tanking guide breaks down into 4 components, I believe. Tanking. We have threat and aggro, not dying, which is important. The tank classes and awareness. I think these are the 4 cornerstones of being a good tank, or being a tank in general in WoW. So let's get on with it. So threat. Very, very important that a tank understands how threat works and how it's generated throughout himself and through the rest of the group. So let's just cover that, shall we? Right. What's threat? Why do I want it? You're a tank. What's the point of being a tank? Well, this is the point of being a tank. When the monsters are hitting the tank and not the DPS or the healers. That's literally what you're there to do as a tank. You're supposed to be hit instead of those people. Why is that? Because tanks are designed to be attacked, unlike DPS and healers. They're tough, they're robust, they've got lots of abilities to help them survive being killed. We'll cover that in a little bit. Not all in detail, just at a very, very high level. Okay, alright, threat. What makes threat? There are basically these 4 things as far as I can tell. Mob seizure, if damage is done, if healing is done, or taunts. Special case taunts. I'll cover them in a little bit of detail. Right, first thing about threat, obviously, talk about it here, the aggro table. When a mob initially sees you, or any members of your parties, it gets the, I like to call it, oh, you're over there, aggro. Which basically means you get sat on the mob's aggro table. Imagine each mob has its own table of aggro. Depending what you do to that mob will judge where you sit on it, how much it dislikes you meter. The idea of a tank is to be at the top. Okay, so obviously the, hey, mob sees you, that's not a lot of aggro. It's just, it means it will come over and start engaging with you, casting spells at you, or physically hitting you in melee combat. So, next step. Damage threat. Basically, when you damage monsters, you build aggro on that monster. So, the more damage you do, the more aggro you build. It's pretty simple. Right. AoE damage. Obviously, it's something that people have to take into consideration. If you AoE, every single mob that you hit with that AoE damage generates aggro onto you. So, some people, they go crazy with the AoE. DPS go crazy with the AoE. They generate a lot of threat. Now, if the tank hasn't got general AoE aggro, say he's just run into combat and hit one monster, not done any AoE, then basically everything would have got the tank kind of, hey, you're over there, aggro. Start hitting the tank. But the second the ranged goes crazy and drops all the AoE onto the mobs, all those mobs, because the tank hasn't got any real threat on them, and I'm holding my fingers up in inverted commas, it will turn around and they will start hitting the DPS. That's often what people say, stop dragging aggro off me. The idea of a tank is you get in there, you charge, you do some AoE, you start building threat on as much stuff as you possibly can, as I've just covered. This isn't deep. It's not going to be super complicated. That's basically what you do. Healing threat. People are like, well, healing threat. I've met some really good healers and they can generate a lot of threat. When I've got my slide wrong. I just looked at my healing slide threat. It should say, when you heal players, you build aggro on all the monsters in the engagement that are engaged at the moment. So, yeah, apologise for my thing. Ignore this. I've done it wrong. Hey, it's quite late at night. But basically, healers can generate threat. So obviously, if you heal too much, you can actually build aggro. And you're like, when's that going to happen? Well, healing aggro often happens when you have a fight where a boss, for example, will summon in other adds into the fight when it's actually happening. And when those adds turn up, obviously, they've got an empty threat table. Now, if the first thing that happens to them is they see all the players, hello, you're their threat, and then the healer does a heal, unless the tank has some aggro on those things by inflicting damage, the healer will get aggro. It's often called healing aggro. Sorry for my slide being wrong. Taunt. Right, so we've done you're there aggro, we've done damage aggro, we've done healing aggro. Taunt. Taunt's special. So basically, it's an ability you use as the tank to put yourself on top of a mob's aggro table. But the thing about this is, you don't stay there unless you build more aggro. So if you just do a taunt on a mob and leave it alone, that mob will attack you for a little bit, then it will turn around and whoever's next on its aggro table, it will go in, whoever's still damaging it or healing, it will basically go off and attack them. So as a tank, you can taunt, but it's not a way to it's not a way to I feel like so many people need to understand this. The taunt is not a way to maintain aggro, it's just a way to grab aggro off of someone who's got aggro. Taunts are often exist, so basically you can emergency grab taunt or like aggro off someone, or you're in a situation with multiple tanks and you can switch around the target's threat top spot on its threat meter. So basically, if a tank is going crazy on it, you can always just override whatever threat they've put in and supplement it. But obviously, if you don't carry on, they'll get the aggro back. It's a raid thing, multiple tank thing. Don't worry about it too much if it's a more advanced technique. If you're not going to be raiding when you first start playing, so don't worry about it for now. But that's what it's used for, and that's the way it operates. Gets you on the top of the mob's aggro table, but you won't stay there unless you keep on putting aggro onto it. Right. This is why tanks are good at getting aggro. They tend to generate just by the virtue of the fact that they are tanks. It's a design that Blizzard have put in. A tank's attacks and damage count for more aggro than a DPS's. That's the nature of the tank. So they generate more threat per damage than DPS do, or healers. So that's why it's kind of easy to keep up threat, but it's not easy if you take your finger off the button and lose track of what's going on in your group. Cool, so that's threat covered. Next thing of being a tank is the simple process of not dying. No one wants to die. It's sad. Right, so the two things that help you with not dying are your passive abilities and your cooldowns, or as I like to say in my guild, are pops. We like to shout pop when things go wrong. Right, passive abilities. Armour, avoidance, health. They are the things that just operate all the time that make you tough. Make it nice and sturdy so you don't die. Armour reduces the amount of damage you take. Avoidance literally circumvents any incoming damage based on percentages and chances. And then health. Health is just a by-factor of tanking gear, that you get more health and you tend to just have a larger health pool, so you can be more of a punching bag. All of this stuff is based around gear, and obviously all of these stats are bolstered by gear. Some of the passive abilities aren't bolstered by gear, they are unique to class, and each class requires its own kind of look at how their passive abilities work for that class, because not every tank has the same stat weighting for gear. So some people wear leather, some people wear plate, some people are more into avoidance, some people are more into, you know, parrying, blocking. Certain classes don't have shields, so they can't block, so they have strengths in other areas. So I think when you start off, it's suffice to say, it's good enough to know you got passive stuff that helps you stay alive. Right, next up, cooldowns or pops. Okay, these are the things that you have to help you get by with the hard times. Now, when I say hard times, bosses tend to have abilities that means that they generate spikes in damage. So, for example, you'll have a dragon that breathes fire on you. Obviously, this is a spike in damage. It might be a mob that grabs you in its claws and crushes you to death. Now, in order to help you through that, you have big cooldowns which tend to be on longer timers, like a minute, 2 minute, 5 minute timers, and basically I'll just call them pops. So they're things you can pop to help you get through the difficult times. Different classes have different abilities and different number of abilities, so you know, your mileage may vary on what class is good or not for doing that stuff, but every single tank has those abilities. They also have kind of like, I think they have some mini abilities, so they have like mini pops as well, which help them get through. So I know like a Death Knight will have like a bone shield. It reduces the amount of damage taken. I think it's been a little while since I played the Death Knight, but it helps you survive. They are active mitigation basically. But don't worry about that. It's a matter of covering it for each class itself. Okay, right. Tank classes. Not every class can tank, and here I'm not going to go into detail about how each class tanks in this video, but this is a list of the classes that can tank. So obviously you've got the Protection Warrior, the Guardian Druid, the Protection Paladin, the Blood Death Knight, the Brewmaster Monk, and the Vengeance Demon Hunter. So there are a lot of flavours. There are 6 flavours of tanks, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses, and abilities, and agility, and survivability. So obviously it's down to what you like doing, really. There are different classes that play better in the meta, but they're all tanks. They're all capable. It's what you like, really. When you start, anyway. There isn't a wrong choice, I don't think. Someone might disagree with me, but I think when you're going, if you're not going out there to be the best of the best, I think that most normal guilds will accept a tank who is competent and knows his stuff and understands his skill set and knows how to play. I think none of them will kind of go, you can't play because you're a Brewmaster Monk, it's rubbish. If your guild does that, then yeah, maybe they're not nice people. Anywho, right, Awareness. I think I spelled that wrong. A bit annoying. Oh well, whatever. Awareness, or Awarness, as I like to call it. Basically, keep your wits about you as a tank. That is one of the golden rules of being a tank. Right, things you got to look for. You got to look for mobs losing aggro. You know, you can't always keep up complete aggro on everything in the game. Things turn up, new mobs turn up into fights. You got to keep your eye on them. You know, a new mob spawns in, you got to think, oh, that new mob is not going to have any aggro on you because you've done nothing to it. Your only vector of causing aggro is causing damage normally. So, you know, a new mob turns into the fight, you'll have no aggro. If you don't keep up on these things, then basically the healer's going to get aggro on it. You don't want the healer getting aggro. So, you know, a taunt might be a thing you do in that scenario. Plop yourself on the top of its meter or its table, make the mob come over to you. Awareness, interrupts. Occasionally things do casts that are really, really bad abilities. Sometimes you just have to interrupt them, and a lot of the time it's the tank's job to do that. They can usually interrupt more frequently than DPS. Definitely DPS. You know, lots of things like the paladin almost has like a very, very reliable, frequent interrupt of casts. Sometimes you've got to do it. If you don't interrupt, you will die. The whole group will die. It's not really an option. So, and often that responsibility falls down to the tank to do it. New mobs, I've spoken about briefly. New things turn up, they need aggro. They need to be generating aggro. You need to be generating aggro on them so they're hitting you. And in general, I think it is the perception. It might have got a bit old school since like the last expansion and stuff like that, all the various sort of modern expansions. But historically, tanks were the leaders of parties. They set the pace. They have to be aware. They have to make sure that the DPS and the healers are actually keeping up. And when you start off, don't feel the need to go crazy, rush forward. It's not a race. It's not a race. Tanking. It's about being successful. So you've got to try and be as active and aware as you can. So I think these are the main points you have to follow. Right. I believe that is my mini lecture on the basics of tanking done. So if you have enjoyed this little mini lecture on tanking, then if you could throw me a like and a subscribe if you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll do some more of these. So until next time, I'll see you later. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.